Hello and welcome. My name is John Dickinson, and in this walkthrough After Effects tutorial, I'm going to share with you some of the tips and techniques I used to create this look, combining After Effects 3D layers and lights with Continuum Particle Illusion and Title Studio. So download the project file and let's get started. Okay, so we're not going to recreate this step by step. I'm going to walk you through what I created and just point out some of the key tools and techniques. Now, this is the finished composition, and let's just take a quick look at this before we dive in a bit deeper. At the bottom here we have this room composition. So this is everything that makes up this room, and these are all After Effects 3D layers, and they've been pre-composed. We'll talk about that in a moment. Above that we have the torch particles, and that's using Particle Illusion. Above that we have 6 lights and a camera. We have a Title Studio layer, which is providing this orb in the middle. And we have sapphire rays applied to that. And we have a spotlight illuminating this area. We have the Particle Illusion text, and we have a few continuum adjustment layers. So let's go straight down to the bottom and break this down. I'll just come up and turn off the proxy for a moment so we get access to the live layers. So at the very back, we just toggle transparency, is a black solid. Above that we have the room. I'm going to turn the black solid off and toggle transparency again. And you can see I've put a black solid in there just to fill in that transparency. Now, this room is being rendered using the Cinema 4D renderer. And it's a little slow because I have off final quality selected. I'm just going to switch that to fast draft, and that'll speed things up. You can see I've actually lost the shadows there as well. So all of the layers that make up this room are all in the pre-comp. Going to double click that one. So let's talk about the walls and ceiling and floor first. So these are just solid layers, just positioned in 3D space with the 3D layer checked. Come up to 2 views horizontal. Just roll my mouse wheel out there. You can see I've just positioned some solids in 3D space just to make this simple room. It was pretty straightforward. And just change this back to 1 view. So that's the actual room itself. Now, in the middle of the room, we have a pedestal. And you can see this is actually a 3D layer. And the reason it can be 3D is because I'm using the Cinema 4D renderer. Just press U twice on the keyboard just to reveal the change parameters. So it's a rectangular shape layer, and you can see down under geometry options, I've got extrusion depth set to 302. I might just make that 300. I'm going to roll in here a bit so we can see. Now at the moment there's no lighting in here, so it looks very flat, but it does have a bevel depth of 10 and a bevel style of concave. Now on the walls we also have some torches. And you can see the torch itself has been pre-composed as well. Let me just double click that. So the torch has been built in its own composition. And you can see I've actually got some lights in here just to allow me to work a little bit more easily with that. I could have done the same for the pedestal. If I turn those off, it looks very flat. But with a few lights in there, you can start to see the bevels in there. So this is made up of 2 layers. Once again, a simple rectangular shape layer with a convex bevel style and a bit of bevel and a bit of extrusion. So that's this one here, just to bevel the edges. You're only very limited with what you can do in 3D and After Effects, of course. And the other one is just the same thing except a concave bevel style. So that gives us that little cut-in bevel. Now the actual lighting itself is being applied in the main composition, and I'm using collapse transformation, so these lights will be ignored, but they are useful to set this layer up. I can leave them switched on or turn them off, it doesn't matter. So that's 2 separate layers. Rather than duplicating that in here, 5 times and having 10 more layers in there, it was better to pre-compose that. Then in this composition, check collapse transformations. You can see if I click on there, it says collapse transformations just above. So that's bringing all the 3D information from the torch composition into this composition. Just turn these on. And here you can see them there. I've just positioned those on the wall. Go to views again, just like that. So collapse transformations when you're working in 3D in After Effects allows you to work more efficiently because you can build semi-complex objects. Obviously this isn't very complex, this torch, but you can build them in their own comp and then bring them into the next comp and duplicate multiple times. And as long as you have collapse transformations turned on, all of that 3D information is brought into this composition. And if we go back to the main comp now, you can see collapse transformations also turned on for the room comp. And what that means that anything that's inside this composition will be affected by the camera and lights in this main composition. Remember back in Torch, I had these lights on here, and I can either have them on or off. In the main comp, it makes no difference because once this main comp is collapsed, then it uses the lights in this composition. So spotlight and all of these emitter lights and also the camera as well. So just to recap, construct your After Effects 3D objects in their own comps and then bring them all into a main comp and then collapse transformations and then add your lights and cameras. Okay, so that's the room itself, and we've been talking about lights and cameras, so let's go on to lights next. Now, as I mentioned, we have these 6 emitter lights, and these are being used by the particle illusion layer, but they're also illuminating the scene, and we have this spotlight. So if I just come back to 2 views, and I'll just turn the lights off for a moment. Just turn these off. And what I also need to do, come into room and just switch off the ceiling. Come back to the main comp. Because we had the ceiling turned on, we couldn't see the torches. So now I can see the torches in this main comp and position the lights. So I'll just turn these back on. And these are just simple point lights. You can see I've colorized them to a nice bright orange and increased the intensity quite a lot. And they're also set to cast shadows. So they've been positioned in 3D space just by dragging the Z-axis, just so that they sit on top of the torches. Now, looking at this, they aren't evenly distributed. So what we might do is go in and just grab these two and shift them up a bit and then move the lights. So I'll come back into the room comp and need to grab the torches. Let's see which ones. It's those two. So I need to drag these back a little bit. Just like that. You can see they're updating in this view as well. Maybe something like that. That looks good. Just unsolo all of these. Close up the room. Close up the torch. And I've got to turn the ceiling off again, of course. Still on fast draft. Okay, that's good. And need to grab this light and this light and just slide those back a bit on Z. Like that. Okay, so one view. I'm going to come back to my room and just turn back on the ceiling. There we go. Okay, so now let's talk about the particles. And then we have these lovely Minecraft style flames sitting above the torches. So if I select the torch particles layer, and once again, this is using Particle Illusion 2021.5. A couple of things to note here. Transforms is set to emitter. And once that's done, we get options for take path from, and I'm using comp lights. So we have one particle emitter and it's attached to multiple lights. And how does it know which lights to attach to? Well, under comp lights, you can see I've got this set to lights named emitter. So doing it this way means that it won't be attached to the spotlight, to which we don't want to attach an emitter. And there are various other options here: visible lights, non-visible lights, first and last, and a number of different ways you can name the lights. So pretty flexible. If I was to duplicate a light, Control D, drag that across. Because that's named emitter, then that gets a particle illusion emitter. Undo that. Let's just go into particle illusion and take a look at this by launching particle illusion. And this is the Pixel Fire Smoke preset. just come up to View and choose Load Layout Create. Under Search Emitters, I'm going to type in Pixel. And here it is here, Pixel Fire Smoke. So this is part of the 2020.5 emitter release. So I've basically left that at pretty much its default settings. And notice how in Particle Illusion, the emitters are tracking the After Effects lights as well. Now, because this is the Continuum version of Particle Illusion, there is access to various parameters outside of Particle Illusion, things like life, number, size, velocity. So if I wanted to, add a few more particles, I could increase it here without having to go into the Particle Illusion interface. Maybe increase or decrease the life and the velocity. So that's a great time saver if you want to just make minor adjustments and not have to launch Particle Illusion. And notice also that I have glow turned on. That's another option inside Continuum, just to make those look a little more fiery. Okay, so super straightforward using Particle Illusion with lights in 2021.5. What I want to point out now is a couple of expressions that I've applied to lights. So if I just choose one of these, with that one there, just roll in with my mouse wheel, press E on the keyboard twice. So there's a couple of expressions applied. The main one to affect the emitter is position, because I wanted these to sort of sit above the torch, but I didn't want them to be static. I wanted them to be a little sort of magical, so kind of floating above. And they looked more floaty, if that's a word, by using a little bit of wiggle on the y-axis. Makes them kind of move up and down slightly. And the expression is super simple. It's just position 0, which is the x, so that maintains its original value. Position y, which is 1, has a wiggle, so a wiggle of frequency 5, amplitude 20, and position 2, which is the z, maintains its original value. So it's just a little bit of wiggle up and down. If I wanted to, really make it fly up and down, I could, make this much higher. And that would make it really jump. Let's just preview a couple of frames. You can see it's moving quite far down now. So that's a little too much. So with this, a little bit goes a long way. I just wanted a little bit of movement up and down to make it feel like it's floating. And you will also notice there's some flicker of the light on the wall, and that's done by using a wiggle expression again on the intensity of the light. Now, this isn't affecting the intensity of the emitter, but because this is kind of flickery anyway, this Minecraft fire, I thought it helped better integrate the emitter with the lights if the light was also looking like it was flickering as well. I mean, it's supposed to be fire, right? So you'd expect fire to be a bit flickery rather than being a constant light. So once one light was set up, I just copied and pasted the expressions onto the other lights. Probably would have been better workflow to set up the single light with the expressions and then just duplicated it and then just positioned the lights in place. Okay, so super easy workflow with Particle Illusion 2021.5 and After Effects lights. It's so nice to be able to now position the Particle Illusion layers in After Effects 3D space. Next, I have a camera, and if we just go to two views, there's my camera there. Camera's got a couple of keyframes on the Z. You see, on the Z position. So it's just pushing in. And of course, the Particle Illusion emitters can move with the camera if we have Use Comp Camera checked. Now above that, we have a Title Studio layer. I was interested to add a little bit of Title Studio because Title Studio has been able to use the comp camera in After Effects for quite some time. And that was only recently introduced in Particle Illusion. But now that Particle Illusion 2021.5 can also track After Effects lights and After Effects 3D layers, I wanted to try it together with a Title Studio layer to see how they could be comped up and have both Title Studio and Particle Illusion use the same After Effects camera and see how that might look. Notice also that Title Studio can use After Effects comp lights as well. And that's exactly what I'm doing here by adding a spotlight. That starts to affect this Title Studio object, and it's also affecting the pedestal. Now you can see for Title Studio I'm using this Platonic file. This is a Cinema 4D file that's available inside of Title Studio. There's a bunch of different presets in here. Let's just click to launch the UI, take a quick look. So I used the Platonic preset and just deleted a few layers, just leaving me with this one Cinema 4D object. Just twirl that open and just select the imported model. So this is a Cinema 4D model, and I've added a couple of keyframes for spin Y, just to have that spinning around in the scene. You can see at 0, I have 0 revolutions, and at the end, I have 1 revolution. Let's just make that constant. Bring that back to 0. So now I have no spin. Come back to the beginning. Change this to linear. Come to the end. And change this to 1. Simple as that. So it's nice to be able to bring Cinema 4D models into Title Studio and interact with them directly in After Effects like this. And as far as the color, just got a simple black. And I'm not using any bump or texture or reflection. And because that's black, you can see it's picking up the color from these lights. Remember, these ones I'd set to this orange. And the spotlight is just a pale orange as well. And to make that pop out a little bit more, I've used sapphire rays. Just move my time indicator a little bit. So sapphire rays is just pulling out some rays from the brightest areas. Make that look a little more expensive. It's like that. And I could have made this a gold texture, but it was way too bright and blown out. So by making it black and having it pick up the color from the lights and then using the rays, makes it look a little darker, just picking up these highlights as the light hits it. And with the rays, I think it makes it look a little more mysterious. Above that, we have some simple 2D text. This is simple After Effects text, just the words particle and illusion, set to 3D. And to finish the whole look off, I've used a couple of continuum effects, BCC plus Film Grunge and BCC plus Looks. Let's just turn those both off. And what we'll need to do now is come back and just turn this to off final quality. One thing we'll see when this redraws is that the shadows will reappear. See the shadows there? Now I did set for the lights to cast shadows. We just twirl, let's just grab emitter 1, twirl that open. You can see cast shadows is set to on. And you need to make sure inside this comp that your 3D layers that you want to cast shadows, you have that also set on. So here cast shadows is on, and accept shadows is on, and accept lights is on. So if you're wondering where your shadows are, make sure you've got those settings turned on. Let's close these two. And just switch on this adjustment layer. So I wanted to give this a kind of sepia grainy look, and I started with BCC plus Looks. And that gives us that basic sepia look. Just twirl this open. And if we click on FX Editor, this is where you can check out all of the presets. There's a sepia one down the bottom here. Sepia was a little bit too desaturated. But there's so many presets in here, you'll definitely find something that gets you pretty close to what you need. And then of course you can make adjustments in here and then just click apply. And back in After Effects, there's also obviously the parameters here that you can adjust as well. But I just chose Antique and left it at that. Above that, we have BCC plus Film Grunge, just to add a bit of that old film look. And once again, there's the finished look. So we've got the 3D room in After Effects, using After Effects shape layers, and rendered using the Cinema 4D renderer in After Effects. We've got the Particle Illusion 2021.5 layer, which is using the new light tracking feature, tracking those After Effects lights. And they're bouncing up and down with that wiggle expression on the Y. and also flickering a little bit with the wiggle on intensity. That's giving us those nice long shadows as well. And we've got the Title Studio layer, which is using a Cinema 4D model directly in Title Studio. And we have a comp camera just tracking in on the Z-axis with the After Effects 3D layers and Particle Illusion and Title Studio objects all understanding and reacting to that camera. So thanks again for watching. To learn more about Continuum and Particle Illusion, or to download a fully functional demo, be sure to visit borisfx.com.